Hi, it's Lee from ColouringQueen.net, and I know it's been a while. It's been a long time since I've said that. I actually recorded my April videos in advance, so it's now the 6th of June when I'm recording this, so it has been a long time since I've said those words. But I am back now, and I hope that you are all doing super well today. Today I thought that I would colour from Maria Trolle's Mandalen colouring book. It's one of my favourite colouring books, and I missed the whole MariainMay colour along, and so I've decided I still want Maria in my life. I've been really looking forward to that colour along, so I wanted to colour from that book at least for our first or second time that I'm back. So, where have I been? Well, last April, it seems so long ago now. uh, I had an appointment at the breast surgeon, and depending on what she said, we were going to go to Sydney afterwards, depending if I needed to stay in Queensland or not. So I was seeing the breast surgeon late on Wednesday afternoon, just before Easter, and she said that she was going to do a punch biopsy on me. It would be extremely painful. And I wasn't too thrilled about that, I can tell you. Anyway, she had a look-see at my pesky breast, and she said, hey, I don't think we need to do this. I think we'll just see you in 6 months' time. It looks like it's healing up well, and those problems that you're telling me about that you're having, it sounds like it's part of the healing process. But if not, see your doctor and come back to me, that sort of thing. So I was super happy because I was expecting this biopsy. So we got back home about 5 o'clock and we started packing to go to Sydney. And we wanted to go to Sydney because we haven't seen anyone for 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years, and it's a long time to go without human contact. The only visitors that we'd had in that time was a couple of years ago when David's mother and brother came up, but we've not seen any friends. We've not seen any other of David's family, and in that time his niece has got married, she's had 2 children, and his cousin was expecting a new baby, which he now has, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So we wanted to see, family and friends, and also with all the torrential rain that Australia has, my little doll's house, my little house in Sydney that's absolutely tiny, but I love it. Short things, small things. Good things come in small packages. Yeah, that's it. It got pretty hit hard by the rains. It didn't flood, so couldn't claim on insurance, but it got a lot of water damage, and there were all sorts of leaks and whatnot, and trades are impossible to find at the moment because so many people are affected, and so we decided that we would go down and have a look for ourselves and see what we could do and see what the issues were and whatnot. So we decided to go to Sydney, and David always has this policy of Dave in a day, meaning that he can do the drive in a day. And I'm always like, I think we should do 2 days, especially because we were taking Buddy and Millie with us, and travelling with pets, you've got to stop, a fair bit and let them out and all the rest of it. But David was pretty confident, and as it was just before Easter, it'd be very difficult to get accommodation. So we set out, and I think we were already late because David didn't get a good night's sleep, and so we decided to leave 5 hours later so he could sleep. And so we were already late, and I think we got an hour down the road and we noticed that the car was having problems, like the temperature light and the fuel light was coming on all the time, and the thermostat wasn't working. And then we got stuck in traffic because everyone else had the same idea of leaving a day earlier before Easter and going away and hitting New South Wales, the next state, because the borders have been closed for so long. So I think everyone was heading down in the same path as us, and we just got stuck in traffic for hours and hours. We were only an hour from our house, but we were stuck in traffic for 2 or 3 hours, and so we were already behind, and then we got even further behind. But in the end, we managed to, get down the road a little bit further, and the car was still going okay, so we were crossing our fingers and hoping for the best on that one. And we ended up sort of at the halfway mark, but that was by about 5 o'clock, and by that time the traffic was horrendous. And we later found out that the traffic was so bad because there were actually 2 crime scenes on the highway. A guy had apparently stolen a car and dumped it on the highway, but he'd also had an actual physical altercation with the police, and shots were fired. So there were 2 crime scenes on the road, and the police have to do their job, and so traffic was just banked up for miles, and the traffic was just horrendous. The line of traffic was unbelievable. And of course, when that happens, Mother Nature goes, well, this will be funny if we make it really pour down hard rain. And so she did. And the visibility was just impossible. So I started immediately trying to ring around to get accommodation. But there was no accommodation to be had. It was just unbelievable. And by that time, it was already, quite late in the afternoon, and the pets needed feeding, and it was just getting impossible. But in the end, we had to keep going. We had no choice, because I rang hundreds and hundreds of places, and I could not get accommodation anywhere. But while we were travelling down, we got to see a lot of the places that were hit extremely hard by the floods. And I've got to say, it's devastating. Absolutely devastating. Little towns that we always used to stop at, they would have water tanks there that are as big as my house that were just completely crushed and fallen over, fences over everywhere. But I think the most devastating thing is all the houses that just all have all their belongings out the front. There's just nothing there. And there's a little town called Woodburn in New South Wales near Lismore, and it was hit quite hard with the floods, as was Lismore. And that little town has only now got about 2 or 3 shops open. Everything has just been flooded and destroyed, and all people's lives have just completely been destroyed, and some of them have been through it several times. So it's just unbelievable. And seeing it in person, I can't even describe it, but it was just unbelievable seeing people's ovens out the front and all of their belongings, and the houses just torn to shreds, and it just devastating. And I know a lot of people will say, well, they've got insurance. The thing is that most of them don't. Most of them can't afford the insurance for that particular type of flood, which can be $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And in regional or rural New South Wales, that's a hell of a lot of money. It's not like someone that earns a packet load of money in the Sydney CBD or something like that. That's a hell of a lot of money to pay just for insurance. And the other thing is that a few years ago, a lot of the insurance companies changed what counts as flooding in certain circumstances. So a lot of people might have thought that they were covered for that particular flood, but they weren't. So pretty devastating. Anyway, we finally got I had given up on trying to find accommodation, and then it's like a scab, you keep coming back to it and sort of picking at it, and then I'd stop for half an hour and then I'd try again. And so I tried again, and as this last ditch effort, and they answered, and they actually said yes, they have pet friendly accommodation. I couldn't believe it. I nearly fell out of the car. I just could not believe it. I was just expecting the same as from the response that I'd had from hundreds of other phone calls, which was everyone laughing at me and saying, no, it's Easter. We don't have accommodation. So they actually had pet friendly accommodation, and I told them that we'd be there about 9 o'clock that night. And I was so relieved to have the accommodation. But it was only 2 hours from Sydney, so theoretically, if we weren't so tired, we could have actually kept driving. But as I said, the pets were hungry, and I can't feed Millie in the car in her little cat carrier, and I can't let her loose on the road. And David and I ended up having a little bit of a tiff on the side of the road. He thought that I had booked it for a suburb of Sydney, and I knew that I'd booked it for a suburb that's got the same name but 2 hours from Sydney. So it's very annoying when these suburbs are named the same and they're so close or in the same state, but that's the way it was, and I turned out to be right. He was wrong. He thought I'd booked it for this other place, and I knew I hadn't. But yeah, so we turned up at the accommodation. I think it was like 9:05, and I hadn't heard from them, so I assumed that because they knew that we were coming at 9 o'clock, because I told them that they would have kept the office open. But we turn up, the office is closed. There's no sign of any manager, no bell to ring, nothing, and I'd already paid for it on the credit card, and we were so tired, and it had been pouring down rain, and we couldn't see, and it was just turning into a trip from hell, really. And now this motel's not answering, and so I'm trying their phone number, no answer. I found on their website this mobile phone number, and I rang that, and the guy was super snarky. He was like, well, we sent you an email with the details on how to access your room key. And I'm like, no, you didn't. I've got nothing. I've been checking my email for the last hour, and there's absolutely nothing there. There's nothing in my spam folder. And he really didn't believe it. He acted like I was incompetent with email, which, hello, I get hundreds of emails a day. I can answer them. So anyway, I was a bit peeved, and I was thinking already I'm going to write them a really bad review if I ever get into this room. So anyway, we finally got into the room, and unfortunately, or fortunately, the accommodation was really good, so it made up for the snarkiness of the manager. And just as an FYI, I finally got that email the next day at 7 a.m. in the morning. So just because you've sent the email doesn't mean that it arrives in someone's server straight away. Anyway, I was going to leave them a nasty review because I was really tired, peeved and hungry, but I didn't, because the room was actually really nice and the pets really enjoyed it, and, just managed to brush off the bad manager. The next morning when we were having coffee outside, we ran into a man that had travelled down from one of those flood-affected towns in Lismore, and he was telling me how they'd moved, all their possessions up 12 metres high because they were told that's where the flood would come. And it ended up rising to 14, 15 metres, and they lost everything. It was the third flood that he'd been through, and he wanted to just move to Queensland and live in a high-rise building so that he wouldn't be flood-affected anymore. And it was just devastating hearing him talk about it, and he was in tears and just horrific, explaining what his friends and neighbours had been through and the rescues that they'd done on dinghies and trying to help old people out of roof spaces that had gone up there but weren't able to access their roof to get out to be rescued, and the people that had put their animals in the roof cavities and things like that, trying to save them from the flood levels. It was just absolutely devastating to hear someone's first-hand account. I can't explain how touching it was, but absolutely devastating. My heart goes out to everyone that's been affected by the floods in Australia. And as I said, I've got rain damage on my house, but that's nothing compared to what these people have gone through. Absolutely nothing. And in Queensland, we had a bit of a moat around the house for a while, but nothing, we never lost anything. We, walked away with our lives, with our pets, and we didn't even get any property damage, nothing to speak of. So these poor people have been really through it. So the next day we decided that we would take a leisurely trip to Sydney and explore the suburb of the town of Newcastle that we've never really sort of seen that much of, and geez, it was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous beaches, and they've done so many updates and trams running through the city and gorgeous restaurants, and really looked lovely. And then we took a lovely scenic drive down to Sydney. And as often happens, every time I drive into Sydney from the northern side, I always have this favourite view, and I look out to my left as soon as we're going down Victoria Road over the Iron Cove Bridge, and I always look out onto my left and I look at the view of Hunters Hill, and as per usual, it always makes my heart go, oh, I'm home. It's the same feeling I get when I travel overseas and you touch down at Sydney Airport and I'm like, oh, I'm home. And as soon as we drove over that bridge, I had the same feeling, I'm home. And it really took me by surprise because I thought we were just down there to visit friends and family and, you know, fix up the problems that we have on the house. And, you know, as soon as I seen that view, my heart just went, I'm here, I'm home, I'm never leaving. And then, of course, we went and seen David's mum and his brother. We were staying with them. And David's mum's going to be 80 this year, and she's not in good health, but she's so frail. She's like a little twig, you know, and she's trying desperately to gain weight, which, you know, I told her I was quite happy to give her some of my excess, but, you know, she didn't know how to arrange that. But we're kind of surprised at how tiny tot she has gotten. She's really nothing of her. If you squeezed her too hard, you'd break all her bones. And so we don't squeeze her too hard. And David's brother, unfortunately, he'd been cleaning up his room so that we could stay in there, and he'd actually fallen off the bed cleaning the fan, ended up spraining his ankle and his foot, and was hobbling around. And he'd booked a trip to London so that basically we could be there to look after David's mum, and he could go to London and not sort of worry about, you know, looking after his mother while, you know, he was away. So, yeah, days went on with him hobbling around, and in the end we thought, well, because we're in his bedroom, we better go over to live in my little doll's house that was empty and let him have his bedroom back. So that's what we did, and we ended up buying a blow-up mattress and going over there and camping out, basically, as I call it. We had sort of nothing. We had to borrow some towels, and it was freezing cold, so we bought one of those little fan heaters, and yeah, good times. But one of the good things was that we managed to find the problems with the house. One of the problems was a leak on the skylight, so we managed to find that, but the whole time it was just raining, so it was really difficult to find anything. So then we decided that we would paint the house inside, and I also decided that we'd repave the garden, and I needed new pavers for that from that I got off Facebook. So poor David, he has to cope with all my ideas. And yeah, and the whole time, as I said, it just kept raining and raining, so it was really difficult to do anything. But luckily we found the problems with the roof eventually when it stopped raining and we could access it, and it turned out to be a super easy fix that just required some silicone, so super easy. And we also found the bathroom leak after, you know, throwing lots and lots of water around all over the shop. And we found that instead of the $15,000 that I was quoted by a tradesman to fix, it was again a $15 tube of silicone. So, yeah, moral of the story, it is worth travelling to go and make sure of things that need to be fixed. So we were pretty happy with that. But the one thing on our mind constantly was we'd fallen back in love with Sydney. And we just kept, every day we were trying to think, you know, of tidying the place up and repainting it and whatnot. But we'd spend hours every day just sitting there going, should we stay? Should we go? Should we sell this? Should we not? And I had real estate agents around to sell, and they were ringing me every 5 seconds because they wanted me to sell. And I had real estate agents around to lease the property, and they were also ringing me constantly. And then David didn't really want to leave Queensland because he really likes his job here. And so it just went on and on. Every day we'd decide on something, like we're going to sell the Sydney property and stay in Queensland. That's a smart thing to do. And then the next day we'd be like, no, we're going to rent the Sydney property and we're going to stay in Queensland. Or it'd be like, we're going to sell the Queensland property and move back to Sydney. So every day was a different thing, and it took us hours every day of trying to work out what to do. And of course, I think we were only in Sydney for 2 days, and my breast flamed up again, and I had to go to hospital and have another ultrasound, more antibiotics, and I'll probably have to go and book in for that punch biopsy because there's clearly something going on. I was in a lot of pain with it, and so hopefully, something will be sorted out, and I'll get this biopsy done and they can see what the issue is. But it was hilarious, really, because it was only 3 days after the breast surgeon told me that I'd be fine for 6 months, and then 3 days later I'm in hospital and, getting prodded and poked and prescribed more antibiotics. But anyway, so yeah, we both fell in love with Sydney, and Buddy just loved being in Sydney. He loved being at David's mum's, and he'd every morning, sort of after we'd take him for a walk somewhere, and he'd meet little doggies and whatnot, we'd take him home, and David's mum would babysit him for the day with Millie, and he would go in every morning and he'd just lay on David's mum's bed and snuggle up with her and hog the pillows and watch TV with her, and she just adored having him there. To be honest, I think he weighs more than she does, because he'd push at her and sort of knock her out the bed, because he's 35 kilos and she's tiny. And Millie loved being there. She had her favourite spots as well, and David's mum was always giving her treats, so they really enjoyed it, and she really enjoyed having them. She doesn't have any pets and doesn't want any, but she certainly likes being grandma to them. So they had a good time. And what else? Oh, so then we went up to the Central Coast, and we seen David's brother, and we seen his niece and nephew, seen the little children that she just had, or had a year before or so. And yeah, we all went out for Mother's Day, but unfortunately David's mum couldn't go to the Mother's Day lunch because she was sick. I think in the time we were there, which was 6 weeks, we had to call ambulances for her 6 times, and 5 times she was admitted to hospital. She gets a lot of things wrong with her, and as you do, when you're getting older, but I think one of the main things is that she gets pancreatitis, which is quite painful, and a lot of the times she couldn't breathe, and I'd have to call an ambulance and get them to come over, and sometimes she gets really bad stomach pains and back pains with the pancreatitis. So, and then at one stage, I think David's mum and I did a 2-for-1 deal with the hospital. I had, we'd gone to that Mother's Day lunch, and they must have put nuts or something in the food. Anyway, I got a really bad attack of diverticulitis, and I sort of clutched my stomach and hoped it would go away for 3 days, but it didn't. And so I ended up having to bite the bullet and go to hospital. And I suspected I had diverticulitis because I had such pain in my left side, and I was sort of doubled over in pain. But I also had these really bad aches and pains all over my body, and I just felt awful. Anyway, David's mother, she was trying to convince me to go to hospital, and in that time she'd put her hand across the kettle while it was boiling, and she got a bad steam burn on her wrist. And like many older people, her skin is like paper thin, so it sort of immediately blistered up. And I said, we're going to have to get that looked at by the burns people at the hospital. So we checked in as a 2-for-1 deal. her to get the burn assessed and me to get something for my diverticulitis. And anyway, it turns out that I had diverticulitis, but I also had the flu. And because I'm a sharing, caring person, I gave the flu to David. And we spent like a week aching, and he had different symptoms from me because I had the diverticulitis as well. But we spent, a week snuggled up in this single bed and aching and really suffering through with this awful, awful flu that's going around at the moment. And it was truly horrible, truly horrible. And anyway, we got over it, and, we went back to painting the house and all the rest of it. But we'd also given it to David's mum, and she got it so bad. She kept looking after us and coming into the room, and she said, "Don't worry, I've had the flu vaccine, I'll be fine." And I said to her, don't be too careful. Remember, this flu is really nasty and the vaccine might not cover it. And she said, no, I'll be fine. I didn't get COVID when David's brother got COVID, and, I'll be fine. I've had the vaccine. Well, she had it so bad, we had to call ambulances 3 times, and it was just terrible. She ended up in hospital a number of times, overnight visits and overnight stays, and we had to get home doctors, and she just had it so bad. It wasn't until the day before we left that she actually recovered. So David's brother ended up cancelling going to London because, first of all, his foot wasn't recovering from where he'd sprained it, and he decided to just go to Melbourne. And then when David's mum, he went there for a week, and then when David's mum got the flu, he also came home as well, because she really needed everyone to sort of look after her because she's got so many different things wrong with her. And so she was in bed every day, and she was I think I'm a bad patient, but she takes it to the whole new level. And, so we were getting up at 1:30 in the morning to a 3:30, 5:30. We were both really deprived of sleep, really, really worried about her, and also feeling terrible because we'd given her the flu and we'd recovered so quickly, and she was really, really suffering. But as I say, she's okay now. She became better 2 days before we left, which is good. Thank God for that, because she really, really got it bad. But so the whole time we basically just kept going round and round on what should we do, which we never thought would be an issue. We thought we were going down to fix something, rent it out, come back to Queensland, see family, and that would be that. But, seeing that view when we first came into Sydney, and we'd stopped at a shop and to get a coffee, and the first thing I did was I ran into 2 ladies that I used to have coffee with all the time. Then I ran into a friend that I used to have coffee with all the time, and it was like we were in Sydney for 10 minutes and we've already seen more people than we have in the last 3 years. And it was really nice, and it was just really nice being back in Sydney, I've got to say. Except for the cold. I'd forgotten how cold it was. It was really cold. And I guess because we didn't have any clothes for the winter months, because we thought we would only be there for 2 weeks. So anyway, we finally got everything done on the house. It finally stopped raining to let us finish it off, and David's mum finally got better, so that we could leave her and come back to Queensland, because David's brother had been sort of in and out. Usually he is the one that is around all the time, so that if she needs anything, he can call an ambulance or whatnot. But he'd been with a friend, and he'd gone to Melbourne, and he'd been back and forth and sort of all around because he knew that we would be looking after her. So he finally came back, and she finally got better, and we finally got things done because it had finally stopped raining and we finally got over the really bad flu. So we were finally able to travel back to Queensland, which we did. We started our trip last Friday and we finally got back home. While we've been away, my neighbour across the road has sent me text messages saying your house is still here, everything's fine. So that's been good. And then we, finally got here, and it's so good to be back home with your own things and your own hot shower and your own towels. And after living off so much takeaway for the last 6 weeks or so, I couldn't wait to get into the kitchen and cook something, so I made this great big beef stroganoff. It's way too much for us, and some chocolate cupcakes, no sugar, diabetic chocolate cupcakes, and it's just so good to be back home with all your things. When you go for 2 weeks just with your mobile phone and with no computer or anything, it's really difficult. And my mobile phone wasn't really working that well. I had a lot of trouble with Facebook posts and things like that. And David had said pack your computer, but I thought we were only going for 2 weeks, so I thought the phone would be sufficient, but really I would have been better off with the computer. But it's just so good to be back home. When we were driving up, we were thinking the lawn's going to be like 1 metre high and the pool is going to be green. And when we got closer, the lawn wasn't really that bad, and when we came inside, the pool was definitely green. It was like a swamp. So we had to go and get the pool people to put like 30 litres of chlorine in just to get the green out, and then put the salt in it. And it's blue now. It's taken a couple of days, but it's cleaned it up pretty good. And I had to go and mow the lawn on when we got home. But we thought someone had actually mowed the lawn for us, but it turns out it just didn't really grow that much. And of course, by the time we got to Queensland, we decided that we would sell this and we would move back to Sydney. And of course, can you believe it? Now we're having the same conversation. I've got agents coming tomorrow, and when we got back home, the neighbours were so nice. It's kind of made us reconsider whether we should actually leave. Like, we got home and one neighbour has been keeping an eye on our house the whole time and texting me and sort of saying, has something changed because you said you were going to be home in 2 weeks? Everything's okay, let me know if you need anything or if you need the pool pump turned on. Then another neighbour, I'd pulled out a massive load of mail from the mailbox. And then yesterday another neighbour comes over and she said, the mailbox filled up, so here's like another massive load that I've been keeping for you. And then the other neighbour came over and said, I was just going to mow your lawn for you because, we were worried you've been away for so long and been asking the other neighbours where you are. And then our next door neighbours have just moved in, and they're actually a young couple from Lismore who lost everything in the floods. And they've moved in and they are just lovely. And we had a lot of stuff that we wanted to declutter in case we sell this place, and they were so grateful to get it, and they're just lovely people. And then the neighbours over the road that used to have so many cars and be really annoying, they moved out while we were away, and now they're selling the place. So that kind of works out well for us. And so now we're like, but all the neighbours have been so lovely, and everyone came up and came to visit us and see Buddy and, say how much they missed us. And it's like, oh, now we don't know what to do again because, we had no idea that they would be, that nice. So yeah, now we're sort of back to the beginning, but I'm seeing our agents tomorrow. So, if you like to sort of take a punt, maybe you can put below in the comments what you think, if it's going to be Queensland or New South Wales. will we move or will we stay? You know, what do you think is going to be the result of all this toing and froing? Because I'd really like to know. I should get a poll going of should I stay or should I go? But anyway, so I am a bit behind on messages and things like that. I've got so many emails and messages and so many things to do, and I'm just so far behind on absolutely everything. And so bear with me. I've got lots and lots of messages to go through. So if I haven't gotten to yours, it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's just that I've really got a lot on my plate at the moment, and if we are moving from here, I've got a lot to do, and if we're staying in Sydney, I've got a lot to do, and all up, I've got a lot of little admin-y type things to do. But I am definitely back and definitely here and definitely interested in what you think, if we're going to stay or if you think we're going to go. I should start a poll. And I am sorry that I wasn't able to do the new releases posts and the what's on posts for the last 2 months, because doing them from my mobile phone, I tried and it was just really impossible. It was just too hard to get it formatted and to do it properly. So please forgive me, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.